Tristan da Cunha. Scattered across all 7 seas are the islands and archipelagos that make up the 14 UK overseas territories. One of the most remote of all lies 500 kilometers west of Cape Town in the center of the South Atlantic. The only way to get there is by boat across some of the roughest waters on the planet. Tristan was ignored by early explorers as a possible home due to its rugged mountain landscape, absence of natural harbor, lack of land for agriculture, and a harsh climate with heavy rain and high winds at all seasons. It took an extraordinary breed of people, ready to live at the margins of life, to settle and eventually thrive in the world's most isolated community. The Tristan da Cunha Islands were discovered and the main island named by the Portuguese Admiral Tristan da Cunha en route to the Cape of Good Hope in 1506. The quincentenary of this event was celebrated by a series of events in 2006. Tristan started to appear on nautical maps from 1509 and also on Mercator's 1541 world map. The discovery of Tristan da Cunha was no accident. Tristan was on the preferred route out from Europe to the Indian Ocean in the days of sail. The Dutch East India Company insisted from 1617 that their sea captains zigzagged the Atlantic, picking up the northeast trade winds from Europe towards the West Indies, hugging the Brazilian coast where the southerly flowing Brazil current would prevent them being becalmed in the equatorial doldrums, then picking up the reliable westerlies towards the Cape of Good Hope and the Indian Ocean. It was thus that Tristan was on the maritime motorway of the 17th, 18th and early 19th centuries. The first recorded landing was by the crew of the Dutch vessel Heemstede in 1643, who replenished their supplies with fresh water, fish, seals and penguins. The Dutch mounted 2 expeditions to Tristan between 1650 and 1669 to explore whether the island could become a supply base for ships. But this idea was abandoned, probably due to the absence of a safe harbor. In the late 18th century, an increasing number of American whaling and sealing ships frequented the Tristan area, and Captain John Patton of Philadelphia used the island as a base during the 1790 Howe summer. Living in tents and collecting seal oil, the first attempt to settle on Tristan da Cunha was made by Jonathan Lambert. From Salem, Massachusetts, he had a party of 3 men in 1810 to establish a trading station on Tristan, which he renamed Reception on what he wished to be known as the Islands of Refreshment. Tommaso Correia Thomas Curry from Livorno, in Italy, was the only survivor of this fledgling community when James Aramis arrived in 1813, and he reported that Lambert, with 2 companions, had drowned in a fishing accident. Legends of Thomas's treasure are still current in the Tristan community and are explored in several books. It was the British military, however, who secured the political future of Tristan da Cunha when, on 14 August 1816, a garrison aboard HMS Falmouth took possession of the island on behalf of King George IV. The base, known as Fort Malcolm, was established to secure the island when there were concerns that the French may use the island as Napoleon was imprisoned on Stellina after his defeat in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, and also to prevent American ships from using Tristan as a base, as they had during the 1812-14 Anglo-American War. The Admiralty soon dismissed Tristan's strategic importance, especially after the wreck of HMS Julia off the fort in May 1817, with the loss of 55 men, founding a British community, a small group led by Scot Corporal William Glass with his South African wife Maria and 2 children, and accompanied by Devonian stonemasons Samuel Burnell and John Nankivel, persuaded the commanding officer of the British garrison to remain on Tristan. They began a most remarkable project which they called the Firms, underpinned by a signed voluntary agreement of communal living including equal shares of stock and stores, equally divided profit, equal shares in paying for purchases, no one superior over another. This agreement was signed on 7th November 1817. The picture left of William Glass outside his thatched home was painted by artist Augustus Early, who was marooned on Tristan in 1824, and is reproduced with permission of the National Library of Australia. Shipwrecks, comings and goings. The tiny community grew slowly, and many only stayed for a short time. Exceptions were Englishman Richard Riley from East London, who was shipwrecked on the Sealer Emily in 1820, and Alexander Cotton Hall, arriving in 1820 aboard HMS Satellite, who both settled permanently. In 1821, Tristan hosted 50 survivors of the East Indiaman Blendon Halls who were rescued from inaccessible Trae. This influx more than trebled the population and led to food shortages during the 1821 summer. Early attempts to trade directly in seal oil and skins failed as the Tristan-owned schooner Jane was wrecked in Table Bay. And when co-founder Burnell absconded with the profit on another Cape Town trip, the world's first and most successful blind date. In 1826, sailor Thomas Swain from Hastings in Sussex arrived with many stories, including one that he had aided the wounded Nelson C. Left and brought up the number of bachelors to 5. Only William Glass had a wife and family. So Simon Am, captain of the Duke of Gloucester, a regular visitor to Tristan, was commissioned allegedly for a sack of potatoes per woman to try to persuade suitable partners from the island of Statadela to try their luck with the lonely men. Amazingly, AM returned in 1827 with 5 volunteers, and it is reported that Thomas Swain, who had vowed to take the first woman to step ashore, duly took Sarah Jacobs for his wife. By 1832, Tristan had a population of 34 with 6 couples, growing and successful community. The 1840s and 50s saw more ships, with up to 70 whalers being seen from the settlement on one occasion. Pieter Groen, who became known as Peter Green on arrival from Katwijk in Holland, was shipwrecked on the ship Emily in 1836, and with American whalers Thomas Rogers, 1836, and Captain Andrew Hagan, 40 Knightweed, married island girls and brought new blood into the growing community. Rev. W. Taylor, pictured left with Peter Green, was the first resident priest and schoolteacher. Down but not out. William Glass died of cancer in 1853 at the age of 66, and his death was the catalyst for an exodus of 25 family members to join relatives in New Bedford, Massachusetts in 1856. A further 45 people left with Rev. Taylor in 1857, many settling in Riversdale, South Cape Province. As they left, there were only 4 families, totaling 28 people in the world's most isolated community. Peter Green took over from William Glass as the unofficial spokesman, but never regarded as leader of the community. Maritime motorway closed. Tristan da Cunha became increasingly isolated from shipping as a result of 3 important world events. The 1861-5 Civil War virtually curtailed the already declining whaling industry, whose ships had often called on Tristan for supplies. The Suez Canal's opening in 1869 gave a safer and much quicker passage to Far East markets, avoiding the perils of the South Atlantic and Cape of Good Hope. Finally, steam replaced sail, effectively isolating Tristan da Cunha, which soon lived up to its modern Guinness Book of Records title as the world's most isolated community. Arrivals. Thomas Glass returned the surname to Tristan when he returned in 1866. HRH Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh and second son of Queen Victoria, visited aboard Hamzella Saarreiter in 1867, after which the settlement was officially never locally, known as Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. 1878 saw the wreck of the Mabel Clark en route with coal from Liverpool to Hong Kong. Timbers from the boat are still visible in a Hagan family home, and a bell is in use in Staireyes Church. When Rev. Dodgson arrived in 81 on the ship Edward Vittery, which was wrecked off the settlement possibly deliberately to claim insurance, Tristan's population had grown to 110. The insurance racket was repeated with more disastrous consequences in 1882 when the Yankee ship Henry B. Paul was deliberately beached at Sandy Point. Black rats came ashore, caused havoc with seabirds and islanders' crops. Insurance companies became reluctant to insure boats sailing in South Atlantic waters, which declined trade still further. Lifeboat tragedy. Few tragedies can have had such a devastating effect on any world community than the 1885 Tristan lifeboat disaster, with the loss of regular shipping and trading opportunities. Virtually all of Tristan's able-bodied men, 15, decided to attempt to trade with the ship West Riding when it sailed off the island on 28 November, despite unfavorable weather. Sailing in a newly donated ship's lifeboat, they rowed out of sight eastwards beyond Big Point. The incident remains a mystery, but the 15 men were missing, presumed drowned as their lifeboat probably capsized in rough seas. When the ship city of Sparta called on 26 December, the population was 92, with 13 widows left by the tragedy and only 4 adult men, including Peter Green, 77, departures and arrivals. Rev. Dodgson returned and the British government set up an annual supply ship to help the beleaguered community. The islanders were offered a free passage to Cape Town, but only 10 people left with him in 1889. A further 13 emigrated in 1892, leaving a population of only 50. It was again shipwrecks which came to the aid of the lonely island. The Allen Shore was wrecked in 1892 and the crew, led by Captain Cartwright, helped the community, particularly by assisting the women to tend the potato patches. In the same year, the barkie Italia caught fire in mid-ocean and successfully beached in Seal Bay. Two of its crew, Andrea Repetto and Gaetano Lavero of Camogli in Italy, stayed behind and added their Italian blood and surnames to what was becoming again a viable community, which consisted of 74 people in 18 families by 1899. Self-sufficiency. The island community regrouped and honed skills of self-sufficiency, relying on hunting and gathering trips to inaccessible island, using new longboats thought to be developed by the carpentry skills of Gaetano Lavero. Eggs and meat from albatross, shearwaters and penguins supplemented sometimes scarce farm produce. In 1906, almost 400 head of cattle were lost due to overgrazing of depleted pastures in unusually dry weather, which also meant a very poor potato crop. But no one starved, and the islanders had the benefit of Rev and Mrs. Barrow's ministry and teaching, landing at a northeast beach, still known as down where the minister landed his things, including a harmonium. In 1908, two Glass brothers returned, married the Irish sisters Elizabeth and Agnes Smith, who proved influential in teaching and founding the Roman Catholic faith on the island. Isolation and progress. Tristan's most isolated period was during the First World War, when the Admiralty abandoned the annual supply ship voyage in the Boer War, and it is reported that Tristan had no incoming mail for 10 years until Harmis, Joachim's Yarmouth brought news of the armistice in July 1919. The 1920s saw the ministry of Rev Martin Rogers, who organized the building of St. Mary's Church and ran an expanded school in Andrew Hagen's house. The first scientific expedition to Tristan da Cunha was carried out by a Norwegian team led by Dar Erling Christophersen, and including Alan Crawford as surveyor, who completed the first detailed land-based map of the island, Ems Atlantic Isle. As the Second World War approached, German U-boats and the battleship Grafspee was sighted off Tristan, and in 1942, a top-secret naval station codenamed Job 9. L'Ems Atlantic Isle was established on Tristan. Its role was to monitor U-boats in those days needed to surface to maintain radio contact. A local unit of 16 men were trained as the Tristan Defense Volunteers, but Tristan only had a communications role in the world conflict. The impact of the station was nevertheless dramatic. Under the command of Surgeon Lieutenant Commander Woolley, new buildings were constructed including accommodation, offices, and for the first time a purpose-built school, hospital and store. Islanders were employed for cash wages for the first time and were able to spend them in the store, still known on Tristan by the name Canteen as it was during the war years. Perhaps more significant was the role occupied by Dr. Woolley, who revived the island council, and through his role in charge of Ayamasic Isle, effectively became the first of a line of British administrators. Unlike the priests who also exercised a leadership role, administrators were official representatives of the British government in what was to change from the British Empire to British overseas territories. Over the next 60 years, islanders' homes were vastly improved by the installation of running water and a sewage system linked to new privies built originally outside homes. Factory age. After the war, part of the wartime infrastructure was maintained as the UK government provided expatriate personnel for key services including administrator, radio operator, doctor and teacher. Rev Lawrence, who served as priest during the war, successfully lobbied for the development of a commercial fishery exploiting the abundant crawfish or Tristan rock lobster, which he realized would be in demand in high-class restaurants across the world. Following a successful fishing survey expedition aboard the MMV Picana, the Tristan Development Corporation was formed in 1949, and a canning factory built on Big Beach later that year. So paid employment, begun during the 1942-46 naval station period, was expanded as men were employed to go out fishing. Additionally, there were jobs in an expanded range of government services and in domestic service in expatriate homes, in a tradition which extends to this day for those few outsiders who are privileged to work on Tristan da Cunha. Good times. Tristan was enjoying an economic boom, boosted by real earnings from crawfish royalties and by the better communication provided by regular fishing and supply boats. 1955 AC saw a scientific expedition to Gough Island, followed by an agreement with the South African government for them to maintain a permanent weather station on the island. A condition of the Goat Fleece was an annual visit to Tristan by a South African ship, first SAS Transvaal, and from the 1980s RLS Agulhas. Still a crucial lifeline for the isolated Tristan community. Riar Prince Philip became the second Duke of Edinburgh to visit Tristan in 1957, and he laid the foundation stone to what became known as the Prince Philip Hall. Tristan was probably regarded as a model British colonial outpost until it was blasted into world attention in 1961. The Earth moves. Active volcanic islands can seem very benign as the timescale between eruptions can span centuries. To a modern geologist, the telltale signs were there for all to see on the island of Tristan da Cunha, a classic pyramidal shape with a symmetric summit crater, a recent lava flow at Stony Hill not yet covered by vegetation, and everywhere evidence of hundreds of previous dark grey lava flows sandwiched between layers of fragile ash, often looking like Aero chocolate. But there had been no recorded volcanic activity during human history. The eruption started as magma pushed upwards and caused earthquakes, which produced landslides directly behind the settlement during August and September 1961. On 8 October, a large earthquake and landslide particularly affected the eastern settlement, where families moved overnight to the homes of relatives in the quieter western district. The following morning saw a fissure open between the settlement and the canning factory where the ground rose. At a hastily organized meeting in the hall, convened by Administrator Peter Wheeler, it was agreed to evacuate all the 264 islanders and 31 expatriates to huts at the potato patches overnight. Escape from eruption. By 10th October, the rising ground had become a new volcanic cone and threatened the settlement nearby, so a decision was taken to evacuate the island. Luck was on the community's side as ships were immediately available for the three-stage relay journey, which projected the world's most isolated community from their quiet home village into the glare of world publicity. The fishing boats Tristania and Francis Repetto were on hand. Rarely are two boats available locally. To take the islanders out of immediate danger to Nightingale Island the following day, 11th October, the Dutch ship Tristan, equipped to carry 400 but only carrying 20 passengers, and due to pick up 2 Tristan girls to embark on nurse training, picked up the marooned islanders for the leg to Cape Town, arriving on 16th October for a hectic few days, and then aboard the Mom's Stirling Castle to arrive Southampton on 3rd November. UK sojourn. The UK government assumed that the evacuation was permanent. There had been several well-documented crises in the Tristan community's history when it was considered by officials that the island community should be abandoned due to accident, environmental and economic circumstances. Surely a volcanic eruption with a lava flow destroying the island's factory and both good landing beaches, with wild dogs savaging livestock and unknown visitors ransacking empty houses, would mean the island would be uninhabitable even for the tough Tristan Islanders, especially as the repatriated community could be assured of a warm welcome, be found jobs and enable children to have a good education. The islanders had other ideas as they struggled to come to terms with their enforced move, first to Pendle Camp in Surrey and then to the former Rafe Calshot Camp on Southampton Water in 50 houses on a road which is still called Tristan Close. Many thrived, children attending local schools and adults employed in a variety of local businesses and ships. But problems occurred. A pensioner was mugged and the islanders lacked immunity from flu epidemics and also had to endure the appalling 1962-1963 winter. Return to Tristan. A Royal Society expedition in early 1962 studied the new volcanic cone. After a positive feedback, the islanders lobbied to return and a resettlement survey party including 12 islanders left on 9th August and arrived back on Tristan on 8th September to begin the formidable task of making the settlement habitable and paving the way for a possible return after a year of neglect. Still expecting them to stay, the British Colonial Office arranged a hasty ballot in December, but the community voted 148 to 5 in favour of returning. An advance party of 51 left Tilbury on 17th March on RMS Amazon, transferring in Rio de Janeiro to the MV Boissevain and arriving on Tristan on 9th April. The main resettlement group of 198 islanders left Southampton aboard the Danish ferry Bornholm on 24th October and on 10th November 1963. The miracle was complete. Most of the world's most isolated community had returned to their volcano-ravaged settlement, rejecting the booming consumer society of England's swinging 60s. In conclusion, The fascinating history of Tristan da Cunha, the most remote island in the world, leaves us in awe. Its isolation and resilience have shaped a unique community with remarkable stories of survival and growth. We have explored the trials and triumphs of the early settlers, the challenges they faced, and their determination to establish a sustainable community. The island's history is filled with shipwrecks, comings and goings, and the forging of deep bonds within its small population. As we continue to delve into the wonders of Tristan da Cunha, we invite you, our viewers, to support us on this journey. By subscribing to our channel, you not only stay connected with the captivating stories of this extraordinary island, but also encourage our dedicated team to bring you more fascinating content. Your support and engagement are vital in sharing the rich history and incredible tales of Tristan da Cunha with the world. Together, let us celebrate the resilience, culture, and unique heritage of this isolated paradise. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable adventure. Remember to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more captivating insights into Tristan da Cunha.